Warning. This chapter contains adult content, so I have excluded that part and will be performing it in a separate video for members only. If you wish to read the chapter in its entirety, please visit the link in the descriptions.
Shut Up and Dance With Me by Witty Dame. Chapter 11. The Shape of You. When he was 10, Lance learned how to surf. They were on a family vacation. The big one. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins. They rented out a house right on the beach. It was cramped and most of them slept on the floor. You couldn't take 3 steps without stepping on someone or something, and the place was filled with voices, laughter, and the smell of spices at all hours of the day. His dad and uncle tried to teach all the kids to surf that summer, but only Lance really picked it up. He loved it, couldn't get enough. He fell a lot at first, got frustrated a bunch, nearly gave up, but he stuck with it. And the first time he rode successfully through a wave, it was euphoric. Brought him back time and time again just to get another taste. As he got older, he got better. Surfed at different beaches, got a taste of different waters, different waves, got a feel for different boards. He doesn't get to surf as much as he'd like, but he loves every second he gets. He gets rusty sometimes, but it's never hard to get back into the groove. What he likes best about surfing, he thinks, is that it's an experience. Capital E and everything. Every time he surfs, it's always different. Always a different wave. Each unique and unlike any before it or any after it. Surfing is always surfing, no matter where he goes. But there are always things that make it a unique experience. The people, the water, the waves, the temperature, the beach, the season, the weather, each variable combining into a special moment entirely of its own. At its heart, it's still surfing, but it's the excitement of each new time that keeps him coming back time and time again. The promise of something new, the unknown of what will happen the next time, the anticipation, knowing he'll enjoy it but not knowing what this time will bring. So yeah, surfing is an experience. As it turns out, kissing Keith is also an experience for much the same reason. And just like surfing, Lance finds himself coming back time and time again, unable to help himself and unable to regret it. And if you pause right after the beat drops, he strikes a pose, waiting a moment for Paige to strike one opposite of him. They've always done a good job keeping up with his jumbled thoughts as he works through dance moves. Then pick it up back from here. He moves, and Paige moves with him, slowly, much slower than the actual beat of the song, but that's fine. They're just testing out movements. You should be able to seamlessly shift into the next move here, he demonstrates by stepping right into the already choreographed section they had shown him earlier, only going through a few moves before grabbing Paige's hand and suddenly sending them into a twirl. Ta-da! Hunt claps slowly from where he's watching from the sidelines, letting out a low whistle. That looked great, Lance. Do you think you could, go through all of that again? Slower, maybe. He nods. Yeah, no problem, buddy. Lance lets Paige go, and they twirl a couple more times before coming to a definitive stop. No wobbling, no swaying, and Lance hadn't exactly spun them lightly. He put enough force into that to make the most sturdy of people dizzy. Yet here Paige is, standing perfectly still and straight like it made no difference. Paige's epicenter of balance, it was both impressive and mildly terrifying. They take a moment to adjust their glasses. I'm pretty sure I remember everything. I'm pretty sure I remember everything. Lance mocks, hip cocked in hand making talking motions. Paige rolls their eyes. Photographic memory, dude. It applies here too. But you can't do it at the speed. A glint off their lenses as they tilt their chin, a smirk at the corner of their lips. Come on! They step into position and Lance gestures to Hunk with a flourish. Let the music play! As it turns out, Paige makes it through with barely any hesitation, which Lance likes to attribute more to his ability to lead rather than their ability to remember. After that, they go through it again, slower, with Hunk hovering next to Lance, mimicking the motions. Then several more times, but just the two of them and Lance supervising. So, not that I don't appreciate you helping us and everything. Hunk says 15 minutes later when they decide to take a break. Lance is lying on his back at the front of the room, legs propped up on the mirror, crossed at the ankles.
He looks up from his phone to raise an eyebrow at his friend towering over him. 'Cause I do. We really do. We've been stuck on this transition for weeks, but Paige didn't want to go to you like we usually do because you make such a big deal out of seeing our routine, and they wanted to teach you a lesson for being a brat. Hey! Lance says, brows furrowing as he scolds, tilting his head back so he can glare at Paige. They only shrug, one hand on their hip and the other holding their water bottle to their lips. You would have done the same. Lance considers that for a moment, expression relaxing as he shrugs. True. My point is, Hunk says, sitting himself on the floor next to him and crossing his legs as he leans back against the mirror. We're grateful and everything, but don't you usually have practice too? Like, at this time, specifically. He looks back and forth between Lance and Paige, whose brows furrow as they turn to glance at the clock on the wall. When both pairs of eyes return to him, Lance fidgets, squirming a little in place as he avoids eye contact. Usually, yeah, but, Lance, what did you do this time? There's a sigh in Bridget's voice that has it bristling. What do you think I did something? He snaps, throwing his arms up in the air and tilting his head back to glare at them. They look thoughtful for a moment, arms crossed over their chest, water bottle dangling from their fingers, hip cocked to the side. They nod slowly. Good point. What did Keith do this time? Okay, that's not really a better question. His arms drop, crossing over his chest as he turns his face away from both of them, grumbling and disgruntled. Nothing. So it was you. Hung tries. No! Forgive me, buddy, but I'm not really seeing the problem here. If neither of you did anything wrong, then... He trails out, but Paige picks up where he leaves off. Then why are you here? He sighs loudly, trailing off into a wordless grumble. He doesn't really know how to explain. He doesn't want to explain. Because he barely knows himself. He rolls over, flopping onto his stomach and lying his arms out uselessly at his sides. His knees bend, folding the bottom half of his legs up to the mirror as he kicks at it lightly, but enough to get his tantrum point across. His deep groan turns into a high-pitched whine, hitting a variety of octaves to really drive home his frustration as he rolls his forehead back and forth over the floor. He hears Paige sigh and Hunk make a consoling, wordless croon. A warm hand comes to rest on his shoulder. Oh, what's the matter, buddy? Hunk says, voice soft and concerned. Bless his soul, honestly. I thought you guys were getting better. Like, you don't really argue as often as you used to, and you've been flirting a hell of a lot more? Paige cuts in. That too. I am not! Lance snaps, voice a lot higher than he wanted, but it's too late to cover it up now. He lifts his head to glare at Paige, hoping that makes up for it. Oh, not just you, they say, waving him off. You too. Ah! He groans, putting his forehead back to the floor, half out of comfort for his neck, but mostly to cover the blood rushing to his face. Okay, really, dude. What's wrong? Hunk's hand is back, rubbing soothing circles on his back. And that's the big question, isn't it? What is wrong? Nothing's wrong. Nothing feels wrong when he is with Keith, and that's kind of the problem. Everything is great with Keith. Great enough that any prolonged solo exposure to each other tends to devolve into groping hands and messy makeouts. Far more often than he'd like to admit, especially to Pitch and Hunk. Mostly Pitch. Because that Pitch will go on one of their I knew it tirades. I knew what exactly? He thinks Keith is cute? Yeah, obviously. Otherwise he wouldn't have kissed the guy at the club. And at the arcade. And pretty much everywhere since then. But he knows that if Paige knew that, they'd assume it's something more than it is. And that's another big question, isn't it? One that's been nagging at the edges of his mind and eating away at his gut, but one that he's been firmly ignoring for his own peace of mind. What exactly are they? Friends who make out? Sounds about right. There's where they are now, anyway. The problem is that he's not really sure how they got here. One kiss just led to another, led to more confidence in initiating it, led to hungry and rushed kisses when they were left alone for longer than 5 minutes. It feels good. He likes it. likes kissing Keith. It's an experience that has him constantly coming back for more. But they haven't really talked about it. Not that they really need to. They're both on the same page, but the whole doesn't have to mean anything. He's fine with that. Friends with benefits? Cool. He's chill. The thought of being in something committed again has his chest really tight and the butterflies souring in his gut. He's not really sure he's ready for that. Not again. Not with his dance partner. Not with Reginald so close. Relationships are all well and good until they're not. And when they're not, it sucks. He doesn't like when things go south. Leaves him feeling hollow and vulnerable. He falls too hard, and it takes an embarrassing amount of time to build himself back up again. The risk just isn't worth the reward. At least not right now. It's a risk he can't afford. Not when he gets to make out with Keith anyway. This, however, has put him into a little bit of a dilemma. He's cool with the no labels, and he's chill with the casualty of the whole thing, and he doesn't mind not talking about it because there's nothing that really needs to be said. But because they don't really talk about it, no clear lines have been drawn. So Lance often finds himself wondering just how far he's allowed to go. It's clear to him that they somehow ended up as friends with benefits. He's just wondering how far those benefits extend. Not that he's eager to just jump right back into bed with Keith, but in the moment, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where and how far his hands can go, especially when his senses are kind of overloading with Keith, and his brain is kind of taking a backseat to his body. He's not saying he wants to go jump Keith's balls right now, but it would kind of be nice to know that if they're making out, is it chill or not to kind of go for some under the clothes groping action. And sure, he can kind of just sit back and enjoy the ride, see where the winds take him, ride the tides, live in the moments, and he has been for the most part. It's just something that's kind of on his mind. That's all. He really doesn't want to mess up whatever this is. Not their friendship, not their partnership, and definitely not whatever hands-on label-free road they're taking right now. Unfortunately, all of that is only one of the big fat elephants that have been hanging out in the room of his brain space, and it's definitely not the problem that he's about to discuss with Pigeon Hunk. Time to deflect to problem number 2. Nothing's wrong exactly. He sighs, propping himself up on his elbows and waving his hands around vaguely like that might help him get a grasp on his thoughts. Think he's been good. Great, even. Great, wonderful, fantastic, like the feeling of Keith's tongue down his throat and lips on his, like the feeling of the hard planes of his body pressed up against him in those hard, calloused hands. Right! Gops. Things have been fine. We're friends. It's chill. We're cool. Then we get into the practice room and it just pass the crap. Paige supplies, hopefully. He snaps his fingers, pointing at them. Bingo! It's just fine! Tom raises an eyebrow. Bad. Lance nods. Bad! Explanation maybe. He's just so uptight. He doesn't listen to anything I say, won't take any of my suggestions. He sucks all the fun out of everything. He hadn't really registered himself moving, but as his voice amped, he had pushed himself into a sitting position, legs crossed and arms waving for emphasis. It's a dance! It's supposed to be fun! But he's all no-nonsense McGee up there acting like he's the only one taking this seriously when I ain't taking it seriously! This is a step towards my future! I've been waiting for this for months! Years! There's 2 of us, and I definitely didn't elect him to be the boss, but he sure as hell is acting like it! And then I get mad, then he gets mad, then we both get mad. Then suddenly things aren't great anymore. We're yelling, I'm getting kicked out, or he's storming out, and nothing gets done. And he lets out a long, loud, frustrated groan, throwing his hands up in the air and slouching back against the mirror. His arms come to settle across his chest, chin pointed down and scowl on his face. The silence that stretches between them is short-lived, but feels like an eternity. A single moment that stretches and stretches, thick and heavy, as his hand hangs ominously in the air. He hates it, hates not knowing how his friends will react, hates not knowing whose side they'll be on, hates that he considers there to be sides at all. So, Hunk says, drawing it out slowly, not so much shattering the silence as edging his way into it. Were you kicked out, or did he storm out? Lance looks away, unable to really make eye contact as he tries to hold his scowl. Both, neither. Doesn't really matter. The point is, we're getting nowhere, and I don't know how to fix it. And that's the root of it, really. Over the past few months, he's learned a lot of things about Keith. He knows how to read when his scowl isn't serious. He's learned all these weird little ticks in his body language, all these subtle changes in his expression that are so hard to explain, but he can just read like they're written across his fingers in 50-point font. He's learned Keith's comfort food is chicken nuggets. He's learned that he loves reading during thunderstorms. He's learned he can't really swim, but can run for miles on autopilot. He's learned he hates talking during movies, but puts up with it when his friends do it. He's learned he's incredibly competitive and an adorable sore loser. He's learned that he doesn't laugh loudly often, but when he does, it comes bubbling up quick and sudden like he's not expecting it and doesn't know how to contain it. He's learned Keith really likes to take the reins when they kiss, but then he also falls apart like putty in Lance's hands. He's learned Keith likes to bite and likes to have his hair pulled. They've managed to figure each other out in small ways, fitting together like jagged little puzzle pieces, finding all the dips and rivets where they fit, finding common ground, finding out that they're not really that different and they don't annoy each other as much as he originally thought. They've figured out how to work together. They've figured out how friendship works between them. Hell, they've even figured out how to best mash their lips together. But he can't for the life of him figure out how to simply be partners. Not without the pressure of a time crunch weighing heavily on their shoulders. He doesn't know how to fix whatever this is between them. They constantly butt heads, and it's like every little step they've taken forward doesn't count for shit. They're back at square one. Do not pass go. Do not collect. 200. He pulls his knees up to his chest, crossing his arms over them and burying his face where it can be safe and hidden. I don't know how to fix this, he repeats, aiming for a frustrated but voice sounding a lot smaller and more vulnerable than intended. Hunk's hand is back at his shoulder, rubbing soothing circles into his upper back. He leans into the touch. Is this what I was worried about when Shiro suggested this whole thing? Pidge says with a sigh. He lifts his head just enough to give them a look, eyes narrowed and one brow raised. What's that supposed to mean? He asks wearily. They sigh again, sitting in front of him with their legs crossed. And it's such a matter-of-fact gesture, Pidge's whole posture, factual and concise, that it oddly enough grounds him. It means that I know both of you. You're both stubborn and pig-headed. He opens his mouth to protest, but they hold up a finger to silence him, pushing onward. You both have your ways of doing things, and you're both stuck in them because you think you know best. You're both incredible dancers, but that won't mean crap if you can't work together. I know, but now what? Paige snaps and Lance purses his lips tight, glaring but not arguing. What's been his biggest complaint? Lance thinks about that for a moment, rolls the memories of the past few weeks around in his head. There have been a lot of complaints, a lot of accusations and grumbled jabs, but all... Then I'm not taking it seriously, he says, lips curling at the thought. He is. He's more serious about this than anything else. And are you? Yes! Paige silently raises one eyebrow, crossing her arms over their chest. His brows furrow, lips pursing. I am! It's just not, like, Pete's serious! I don't know how to make Pete serious. Please! Serious looks different on me! Have you learned his routine? Mostly? Lance. I'm trying. I know you are, they say, and again, it's not condescending, not pitying. It's matter of fact, like they've never questioned for a moment that Lance wasn't trying. It's enough to keep him calm. But does he know that? Lance opens his mouth to retort, but it snaps shut, brows furrowing. Keith has to know he's at least trying, right? Has he ever given any indication that it wasn't? Finch only gives him a brief moment to think before continuing. Maybe the reason he doesn't take your suggestions seriously is because he doesn't think you're taking him seriously. But I am! And so he blinks. How? Finch shrugs then. Learn the routine I'm working on. Prove to him that you're serious. Then show him your patented lens behind flair. Not a bad idea. Finch smirks then, a small quirk at the corner of their lips as they gracefully push themselves to their feet, making a show of brushing off their pants. That's what I do. Yeah, except we never fight like that, Hunk says, pride brightening his features as he holds out a fist. It grins. Their fists meet, hands pulling back with flared fingers as they both make explosion sounds. There's a few more movements added in there, but Lance has already stopped paying attention, staring at his pot across the room. Proof to Keith that he's serious? Huh. Yeah, he can do that. Keith pulls into his usual spot 15 minutes before their scheduled practice time. He's early out of habit more than necessity, and he's not exactly in any hurry to get inside. To be honest, he's not really sure why he's here at all. They've got practice the last 3 times a week, but they're not really getting anywhere. In fact, half the time, it feels like they're taking several steps back, just full reverse to square one. He's trying. He really is. He's just not sure Lance is trying. It's also confusing, annoying, frustrating, definitely. Outside the practice room, outside of Altea Studios altogether, they're fine. More than fine, actually. They found this really great balance where they're friends, close friends, who occasionally make out a lot. And he's cool with that. That's not the part that annoys him. The part that annoys him is how as soon as they step over the threshold of Altea Studios, it's like everything that they've ever worked out between them just disappears. They get in that practice room, and before either of them even say anything, the air is thick with apprehension and caution, like they're both holding their breath to see who's going to snap first. He tries to work, he really does. He's got a good idea of where he wants to take the choreography for this dance, and he's been working diligently on it. This is his element. This is where he thrives. Constant practice, focused, precise. Figure out the moves, drill it, let it become muscle memory. Go until it's perfect and he can let his body flow through it naturally. That's how it's always been. Until Lance doesn't fit into his perfect practice routine. Lance's jokes pull him out of his zone. Lance doesn't take the moves seriously. Half the time he improvises new ones and suddenly they're no longer in sync. Lance has a million ideas that are all over the place while they're trying to focus on one idea at a time. Lance moves his limbs with the grace and ease of flowing water, swinging his hips in a way that's mesmerizing, and it's really distracting. Someone always ends up yelling. Lance is goofing off, or Keith is too uptight. Neither of them is ever willing to bow down. One spark. That's all it takes. A dry comment, an insult, a look. One snaps, then the other. By then it's too late. The tension is too high and tempers are flaring. They can't get anything else done. They usually try, but it's wasted energy. One of them usually ends up storming out of the room and they can't practice dancing together if they're not together. Last time it was Lance's fault, but it was Keith who snapped first. Keith had been trying to get them to practice a specific series of moves he was set on, but Lance kept messing up. On purpose! Trying out different things, getting a feel for it. Relax, dude. It's fine. It wasn't fine. It was annoying. Keith was annoyed. It didn't matter if his own choreography was perfect, if Lance didn't sync up. And it didn't help that Lance had been smiling. That stupid smile that makes his insides all jittery and his knees weak and his palms sweaty. It was just a smile. A cocky, self-assured twist of those smooth lips that he was actually getting to know pretty damn well. A cocky smile, half-lidded eyes, lips mouthing words, a sway of his hips, dip of his shoulders, and Keith had snapped. And not the good kind of snap that usually results in him pushing Lance against the closest hard surface and swallowing down those needy sounds he makes whenever Keith bites at his lips. No, the kind of snap where he said something he doesn't even really remember. Something harsh and unyielding, which snapped Lance out of his good mood and had him snapping back. Then it was a verbal volley that ended with Lance storming out and Keith suddenly alone. Yeah, not the best practice session, but pretty much what was becoming their norm. It's pretty much a waste of his time. He could just skip practice altogether, send some kind of silent passive-aggressive message to Lance, and just stay home and watch Netflix. But he's here. Like he's always here. Half out of habit, and half because of some vain hope that something will finally click between them and it'll be like it used to. They did this before. They did it for auditions. Granted, that was more of just teaching Lance a dance he already had and wasn't actually coming up with one together. But it's the same concept. It should be easy, but it's not easy. Why is nothing ever easy with Lance? He sighs as he cuts his bike's engine, sitting back on the seat and pulling off his helmet, shaking out his hair. He sets it between his thighs, resting on the seat, as he gazes up at the building, wondering if it's not too late to just leave. Before he can make a decision one way or another, his phone is buzzing. Unzipping his jacket, he reaches into the inner pocket to pull it out. Shiro's face glares at him, whipped cream smeared across his face from the time Matt actually managed to hit him with a 5 from a spring-loaded device he had planted in the fridge. He swipes the call and puts the phone to his ear. What do you want, Shiro? To have enough money to quit my job and retire to Aruba, where I can live out the rest of my days being a beach bum and a sugar daddy for Laura, while also being a sugar hugger for all my friends, he says without the slightest bit of hesitation. Oh, and your sugar brother, I guess. He's lip curls. Okay, first of all, gross. Never call yourself a sugar daddy again, or a sugar uncle for that matter. Definitely not sugar brother. He pauses to let Shiro chuckle as he nudges down the kickstand and climbs off his bike. Second of all, you love your job. Don't even try to tell me otherwise. I like my job sometimes, he corrects. I like giving tours to kids and setting up exhibits and teaching genuinely curious patrons. But he props putting his helmet away in the bike's compartment and heading for the building. But I hate all our student days. That why you and Laura canceled your practice session together. It's a nightmare! They needed all hands on deck. Every school in the district brought their kids here on a field trip. Every school! I've got high schoolers either ignoring everything or trying to be cool and touching things they shouldn't. I've got middle schoolers shoving each other everywhere and generally just being loud. And I've got kids running around between all of them. Not to mention the parents. Keith nods knowingly. Yes, the chaperones. I'm trying to educate their children, and they're trying to tell me I'm wrong. Keith snorts, pushing through the back door and heading for the stairwell. He takes the stairs slowly, humming to indicate he's listening as Shiro vents about soccer moms and frazzled teachers. It's amusing, to say the least. It's not often Shiro gets this worked up, but when it does, the outburst is hilarious. Turns out one of his tics is self-righteous parents who question his knowledge despite his master's degree in history. You're hiding out back, aren't you? He says after Shiro takes a break in his rant. I'm on break, and it's the only place I can be where it's quiet. Keith hums his understanding, and Shiro goes on. But that's not what I called about. So you didn't call them that before you exploded all over some housewife named Linda over something she once read on the internet? He asks, amused. Shiro pauses. Well, that wasn't the entire reason I called. I also called to make sure you're going to your practice session with Lance today. His amusement immediately sours. I'm at Altea now, he grumbles. You don't need to babysit me. He says, slowly, reproachful. Shiro. He returns, all warning. You need to fix whatever is happening between you and Lance. I know, okay, I know. It's not that easy. It never is with you two. He sighs and Keith's irritation spikes. He knows Shiro is just trying to help, but he resents the fact that he feels like he needs to in the first place. He doesn't want anyone's help. He wants to figure this out on his own. He just doesn't know where to begin. Maybe you guys should try spending more one-on-one time together, Shiro continues, and Keith sucks in a sharp breath, freezing at the top of the stairs and feeling his chest clench. Shiro thankfully doesn't seem to notice. Outside the studio, I mean. Maybe if you work on being friends first, the partnership will follow. Let me see eye to eye, you know? Shiro, Keith says slowly, picking his words carefully. I really don't think that's the best idea. Why not? And he sounds so confused. So deep he is in ignorant bliss. And what's Keith supposed to tell him? That he and Lance spend plenty of time outside the studio together? That every time their friends do leave them alone, their one-on-one time ends up with lips locked and wandering heads quick and needy and hot and heavy. We're fine outside the studio, he says instead. We don't really argue or anything when we're not practicing. You don't? He sounds skeptical, but it's the truth. At least for the most part. They do argue and pick at each other, but there's no heat to it. Just playful challenges and friendly jabs. Lately, even those have become strained. The longer they attempt and fail to actually choreograph the regionals routine, the more that tension and frustration bleeds into their social interactions. But they don't argue. It's more of an awkward silent treatment and jabs with a little more bite to them. Usually followed by make-out sessions with a lot more bite to them. We don't, We can hang out alone without strangling each other. Unless you count shoving tongue down throats, then, well. So what's so different about the practice room? He sounds infinitely patient, and that just makes Keith's irritation worse. I've already told you. He stops as he steps out of the stairwell, pausing when his eyes automatically drift down the hall to room 4D, only to find the door is already open? Not wide open, just a crack. But there's definitely music drifting down the hall, and that is definitely their song playing. Shiro, I gotta go, he says quietly, distracted. Keith, we're not done! But he's cut off as Keith absently ends the call and shoves his phone back into his pocket. He creeps along the hall, steps slow and careful, making sure his shoes are quiet on the polished linoleum. Then the music ends abruptly right in the middle of the chorus, and Keith freezes. He waits, breaths shallow, but then the song starts back up from the beginning. What the heck? He could just walk through the door and find out exactly what's happening, but something holds him back. Lance is never early to practice. If anything, he's always late, sweeping through the door with a lazy grin. It seems ridiculous that he'd be practicing on his own, but Keith presses his back to the wall as he nears the door, creeping the rest of the way. He waits for the song to stop again, waits for the restart, and then reaches out, gently nudging the door open just a fraction wider. He crouches down low, leaning forward so he can see through the crack. Lance is in the center of the room, and Keith has the perfect angle to see him in the mirror. The song starts up, opening notes driving forward, forward, forward. Lance bounces on the balls of his feet, arms shaking out, head tilted back toward the ceiling. Then he's in motion. It starts with a dip, turning to his left with one knee bent and right leg bending in toward the floor, one hand down and the other held out. He pulls up with short jerky motions, legs coming together, hands moving up the torso. There's only a brief pause before he speeds back up, hands and feet moving in rapid succession, turning him around to face the other direction. It's Keith's choreography, or at least a rough start that he'd been able to come up with. Lance's movements aren't perfect. Keith can see where he falls out of form, where the quick movements get lost and improvised, where he doesn't end up facing the right way, but he's trying. He's trying, and he's trying more than he ever has in practice. He makes it all the way to the quick sequence before the chorus before he stumbles. His feet trip up and he loses the momentum of his arms. He stops then, brows furrowing as he curses under his breath, stomping over to where his phone sits with a deep frown on his face. But he doesn't look mad, exactly. He looks concentrated, determined. There's a fire in him that Keith isn't used to seeing. He doesn't think he's ever seen Lance dance like this. He's always laid back and relaxed. Even when figuring out moves, even when he freestyles, he looks at ease. And lately, Keith has seen him angry and frustrated as he dances, has seen the jerky motions of someone with far too much sour and negative energy in their veins. But he's never seen Lance like this. It reminds him of the look Lance gave him in the bookstore when he asked Keith to dance with him. And just like then, Keith feels an odd churning in his gut, a fluttering in his chest. He hates to admit it, but Lance looks good like this. Determination suits him. It takes the wind out of Keith's sails, the ground out from under his feet, makes him feel strange and unable to do anything but stare. Lance is determined to do his choreography. It makes him feel all kinds of ways, and he doesn't really want to analyze any of them besides the urge to push Lance up against that mirror and make him breathless. But then the music is starting up again, and Keith can only watch as Lance jogs back to the center of the room, light on his feet, shaking his limbs out. He looks at himself in the mirror, face still set. He breathes deep, closing his eyes for a moment before opening them again, and when he does, there's a small smirk curling the corner of his lips. It's wow! He's in motion again, and Keith's gaze sharpens as he watches the quick movements, watching where he improvises, watching where he improves, and where he still fumbles. As he nears the chorus, Keith finds himself holding his breath frozen in anticipation as Lance stumbles again. He curses, running a hand through his hair, one hand on his hip as the chorus continues to play. Oh! He glares at himself in the mirror. He sighs. Okay, no! He says, and Keith freezes, but Lance is pointing at himself. You got this! It's easy! You're just overthinking it! He nods, a smile forced back to his lips, confidence slowly oozing back. Easy peasy. He starts the song over, and Keith finds himself scooting just a little further, pushing the door just a little wider to get a better view. Lance goes through it again, and if Keith hadn't been so familiar with the choreography himself, he might not have seen the improvement. But it's there, clear as day. The tiny, minuscule things that are sharper, more precise, the way his body turns at the right angle, the way it's just a fraction more in time. Keith's fingers curl tight as the chorus nears. Lance nails it! There are small things that are a little out of sync, but he pushes through it and nails it. About halfway through that quick succession, he realizes he's going to nail it, and his face lights up. A grin stretches his lips, eyes bright and crinkled, absolutely radiating pride and happiness. Keith's breath itches. He reaches the end of the succession but doesn't stop, even though that's where Keith's choreography ends. He goes on. He leaps into the air at the downbeat of the chorus, throwing his hands up into the air, lands with his legs apart and knees bent. His hands are at his thighs, and then his head whips to the side, carrying his momentum. It's so easy and flawless, flowing easily from Keith's practice movement into something that's so entirely Lance! He just wings his way through it, limbs flying and energy spiking high. His smirk growing more confident and not easy, sliding comfortably back into his movements. It's just, holy shit! It's too much. He's too much. Cocky, confident, infuriating, determined, adorable, alluring. It starts out as warmth in his chest before spreading out like liquid fire in his veins. The warmth sinks lower, coiling in his guts. Then Lance stops dancing, spins and laughs, and it's like music to his ears. Runs his hands through his hair, making it stick up on end in a way that should be hilarious, but just ends up being cute, before shooting himself finger guns in the mirror. Keith's breath hitches again, a low strangled whine escaping his throat before he can stop it. He slaps his hand over his mouth, throwing himself away from the door until his back faces the wall. Hello? Oh no, oh no, oh no! Is someone there? Footsteps on the dance room floor. Panic wells up inside him, eyes darting down to the situation he has growing between his legs. How the fuck did that even happen? What is wrong with him? Screw Lance. Oh, yes, screw Lance. Surprise and panic and shame has him pushing himself to his feet and sprinting as quickly as he can toward the stairwell, quiet and light on his toes. Once past the open doors, he presses his back to the wall, out of sight. There's a long silence that has his ears ringing, the sound of his own breathing and heartbeat way too loud. But then the moment passes and the music starts back up again and from the beginning. Fuck. Keith hisses, groaning as he runs the hand on his face. He drops his gaze down, glaring at the semi he's got going on, which is far too obvious in the loose material of his track pants. Great. It's just great. He's not a stranger to popping a boulder when he's got his back to a wall and lands his lips on his neck, but he wasn't doing anything besides watching him. He's pathetic. Lance is going to be the death of him. He shuffles awkwardly down the stairs, peeking out onto the third floor to make sure the coast is clear before darting into the bathroom. For the first time, he's going to be late to practice. Lance, come on, get down from there, Hunk says, brows pinched and weight shifting from foot to foot. Keith glances up from his phone, following Hunk's worried gaze with a raised brow. He's perched, legs crossed, on the lip of the fountain decorating the center of the park square. Apparently, Lance has decided that the space cleared out on the cobblestone bricks isn't enough of a stage, so he's jumped up on the fountain itself and is currently dancing his way around it. Sorry, Hunk! He calls, twirling around the far end and striking a pose, hips thrusted out and going up on his toes, weight falling back until his hands hit the concrete and his body's in a bridge. He kicks his feet up, holding a handstand for a moment before his momentum brings him back down. He stares with all the grace of a gymnast. It's fluid. It's in time with the music. It's impressive. And the cocky smirk on his lips when he shoots the finger guns is magnetic. He looks back down at his photo and a small smile. Can't stop the beat! Lance says, voice light with a laugh. Can't the beat exist on the ground? Nope! He draws out, and the way he accents it makes Keith feel like it probably has to do with whatever dance move he just pulled off, but he doesn't look up to see. He knows that Lance is doing this for his attention, and Keith is determined not to give it to him. He'll have to work harder than that. I go where the beat takes me, and right now the beat is telling me the groove is right here. He must do something showy and possibly dangerous, because Keith glances up in time to see Huck's face contort, a strangled sound escaping. If you're going to be an idiot, you might as well go on the way. Paige cuts in, and Keith's gaze slides to them. They've got their phone in hand, hooked up to the solo amp that they use when dancing at the park. Their lips quirk up into a small smirk as they change songs. The new one starts out with little preamble. The beat is solid, the tempo quick and driving. They've been mostly dancing to Matt's mixes, as they tend to do, and this one is so clearly meant for club activity. It vibrates through him, urging him to move. He doesn't, of course, but Paige does. They step up to the fountain as Lance laughs, holding out a hand to them. Now we're talking! He tugs them up onto the lip of the fountain and immediately throws them out. Now we're talking, pigeon! Keith watches out of the corner of his eye as they dance around the other side of the fountain, feet quick and steps getting dangerously close to the edge. They jump, duck, down, spin, twirl, and Lance even flips Paige over his back. They barely wobble in their balance, despite getting both dangerously close to either eating water or eating cobblestone. The entire time, they both have wide grins splitting their lips, laughs escaping. People are watching, as they always are, with the occasional cheer or clap when they do a particularly impressive move. Keith is amused. Huck is not. Oh, God, you're going to break your leg. Just like, someone's going to break something, and I'm going to have to drive you to the hospital. You know I don't drive well under pressure, and I hate hospitals. Oh, God, what if you need stitches? I can handle stitches. Keith told them that I can handle stitches. He glances up at Punk, realizes that he's very serious, and sighs, turning to shout over his shoulder, Lance, get down before you give Punk a heart attack. His shoulders sag back, slumping, and head tosses back with far too much dramatic flair. Fine! He catches Keith's eye, though, and straightens slowly, that smirk curling back into place. Keith watches, lips pursed and brow furrowed, refusing to give in as Lance saunters over to him, hips swaying far too much. He stops next to him and turns to face the fountain. He pulls his sunglasses off his head and hands them to Keith. Hold on to these, would you? Keith takes them, quirking a questioning brow, but Lance just grins. Lance, Punk's tone is reproachful. Please don't do what I think you're about to. But his eyes are still on Keith's grin, turning mysterious as it winks. And then he does a backflip off the mountain. Hunk lets out a strangled yelp, the crowd gasps, and Keith's heart stutters in his chest. But Lance sticks the landing, flawless and sturdy, without so much as a wobble or a stumble. He straightens, grinning, hands on his hips. It earns him a few claps from spectators, and he turns to them, falling into deep, sweeping bows. Paige snorts, taking a seat on the fountain lip beside Keith and muttering, Shiro! With both Lance and Paige safely on the ground, Hunk sighs, settling himself on Keith's other side. Lance straightens, waves to departing spectators as the crowd begins to disperse, and moonwalks backwards until he's right in front of Keith, reaching out to pluck his sunglasses out of his hands. He slides them easily back onto his face, winking before pushing them up his nose. Keith rolls his eyes, but he can feel the barest of smiles curving his lips. Lance backs up slowly, playful grin on his face as he makes motions with his hands. It takes Keith far too long to realize he's miming a lasso, twirling the invisible rope above his head before casting it forward, holding it like he's caught him. Keith's smile falls as he gives Lance a flat look. Not gonna happen. Lance gives some experimental tugs on the invisible rope, jerking a little when there's resistance. Come on, Keith! You always come out with us, but you never dance! His grin falls into a little frown bordering on a pout. It's not going to work. Keith remained fixed in place, his own frown deepening. I don't know this song. He tries. Lance cocks an eyebrow. So? That doesn't matter. You're a dancer, so dance! Keith still doesn't budge, and Lance gives up on the lasso routine. Instead, he cocks his hip to the side, arms crossed over his chest. Are you saying if I put on a song that you know right now, that you'll dance? He looks away, unable to hold his gaze as his lips burst tighter. No. Keith! He whines, stepping forward and reaching out to take hold of his wrists. Come on! He's surprised at Lance's strength as he tugs at him, but he leans back, countering the pull with his own weight. Lance, Suddenly, Pidge is plucking his phone out of his hand. He scowls at them. Pidge. Then Hug is putting a hand on his shoulder and pushing him forward. Yes, stumbling off the lip of the fountain. Hug! The lance is already taking advantage of his forward momentum to tug him further into the open space, sliding his hold from his wrists to his hands. He crawls up the back of his neck as Lance intertwines their fingers, grinning brightly. Come on, dude! Loosen up! He says, voice low and teasing. Keith does no such thing. He plants his feet and holds his body rigid. It doesn't deter Lance in the slightest. He dances from side to side, still holding Keith's hands in his and jiggling his arms this way and that. Lance. He tries again. He had meant for it to be a stern warning, but it comes out a lot more plain. When he looks up at Lance's face, he's met with his own reflection in Lance's sunglasses, lip pouting and brows furrowed. Right! Lance's movements slow down a little. His hips still move with the beat, swaying from foot to foot as he takes a few steps forward and back. He tilts his chin downward, glasses sliding a fraction down his nose to reveal his eyes. They're not teasing or malicious when they look over Keith's face. They're curious and thoughtful. I've seen you dance thousands of times, he says softly, keeping it just between them, making it more personable. He slips a hand out of Keith's and wraps his arm around his waist, pulling him in close and splaying his fingers out along Keith's lower back. Keith's hand hovers awkwardly in the air before resting stiff on his arm. Lance's lips quirk into a small amused smile. Don't you dare try to tell me you can't dance! He spins them then, moving them around the space they've claimed as their own. It's not really a style of dance that fits his music, but that doesn't stop him from moving with the beat. Keith moves with him because he has to. Lance is a stubborn lead, but he remains stiff and unrelenting. I can dance, Keith says dryly. This is just... His eyes trail away from Lance. They don't really have an audience anymore, but there are still wandering eyes on them as people pass. He feels exposed, vulnerable. It locks up his joints and stiffens his limbs. Different, he settles on, pursing his lips tight and keeping his eyes down, focused firmly on Lance's shirt. Hey! Lance's voice is soft and kind and has this magnetic effect that has his eyes drifting upward again. He's still looking over the top of his sunglasses, which makes it look ridiculous. But his smile is small and warm and makes his stomach do these annoying flips. He opens his mouth to say something else, but Pidge's voice cuts him off. Lance, I think he's had enough punishment for one day. They sigh, almost dismissively. Lance rolls his eyes, finally letting go and stepping back, holding his hands up in defeat. Fine! He points at Keith before he can turn away. Don't think this is over! Keith rolls his eyes, turning back to the fountain and biting back a smile as he deadpans. I wouldn't dream of it. He takes up his seat again and Pidge idly passes him back his phone. You really should consider loosening up a little bit. Freestyling would be good for you. Lance bows in front of Hung with a big and sweeping gesture. Good sir, may I have this dance? Hung straightens, putting one hand to his chin and holding his other out to put into Lance's as he flutters his lashes. I thought you'd never ask, he says in his best impression of a Southern belle. It has Keith exhaling a sharp laugh and Pidge snorting as Lance tugs him up and they sweep off into a mockery of some ballroom dance while club music plays. Why? He says, tearing his gaze away from the two to slide a look at Pidge, one eyebrow raised. What's the point? My dancing is fine. They shrug, tucking their feet up under them as they scroll through their phone. It helps to be able to wing it. Helps stage fright, you know? Keeps you from locking up if you mess up. Good point. But that doesn't mean he's about to get in front of a crowd and embarrass himself. He crosses his arms over his chest. That's why I don't mess up. Pidge exhales a short, sharp laugh. Seriously, though, it's actually pretty fun once you loosen up. I am loose. Could be looser. Loosey-goosey Keith! Lance calls, and when he looks up, him and Hunk are standing next to each other, hand in hand, free hands extended. Lance starts, rolling a wave down his extended arm over his shoulders and down his other arm to Hunk, who lets it roll out into his free hand before rolling it back. Loosey-goosey! Lance's smile shines in the sun. Keith looks away before he's blinded, idly fiddling with his phone in his lap. I wouldn't even know where to start, he mumbles, brows furrowing. Oh, I can teach you! Keith lifts his gaze to glare at Lance, who puts up his hands defensively as he and Hunk walk back over to them. No, really! Who do you think taught these two nerds how to cut loose? Keith looks to Hunk, who just shrugs, sheepish smile on his face. He's actually a pretty good teacher. His frown deepens. What's the point, though? Regionals is coming up and we need to keep practicing for that. Keith! Lance groans, throwing his head back. Why are you such a stick in the mud? It's Betty's best at, Paige says, and Keith shoves them. What about the Balmarin dance-off? Hunk says. Lance gasps loudly, throwing an arm around Hunk's shoulders and pulling him in close. Hunk, you're a genius! His smile is bashful as he scratches his cheek. Shay mentioned that they're going to start hosting the dance-offs again now that she's back from studying abroad. And Keith has never been to one with us, and I just thought. He trails off, looking to his friends for encouragement. Paige nods, finally looking up from their phone, a smile slowly curving their lips. That's not a bad idea. When is it? In a couple of weeks. 2 weeks to whip our favorite stick in the mud into shape? Lance waves his free hand at him, rolling his eyes. Easy! Paige is full out grinning now, and Keith can practically feel them vibrating beside him. It'll be the return of lunchtime! He frowns at them. The return of a what? You'll see, but if you roll with us, you gotta dance with us. So you either let Lance teach you how to wing it, or you're not coming. So what'd you say, Mullet? His attention is drawn back to Lance, half draped over Ug's shoulder, practically buzzing with the same energy that's ricocheting between them. He wants to say no. He doesn't know what he's getting himself into. He doesn't like freestyling, and he definitely doesn't like dance-offs. But when he meets those gorgeous blue eyes blending with excitement over the rim of his sunglasses, Keith finds himself opening his mouth and saying, Fine. It's a cloudy day when Hunk drops him off in front of Error's books. Hiking his bag up onto his shoulder, he thanks him for the ride and sees him off with a fist bump before tugging his jacket up against the brisk wind. It whips across the parking lot, smelling like a crisp promise of rain. He only hopes it'll wait until they're at the studio.
Inside, he's greeted with a wave of warmth and the scent of coffee and freshly pressed books. It's comforting, cozy, and quickly becoming a combination he's very familiar with. He pauses for only a moment, taking in that first obligatory hit to his senses, before striding along the main path to the coffee shop at the center of the store. He shoves his hands in his pockets as he goes, eyes darting around the store for that familiar mop of air. He's not at the registers, which means he's either stocking or in the back. Lance hopes he's stocking. It's more fun that way. There's no line at the cafe, so he's able to strut right up and scan over the menu board while he waits to be noticed. He gives the girl working a bright grin, orders a iced caramel latte with extra sugar, and leans against the counter to wait. It occurs to him, as his eyes idly scan the bookstore, that the barista had been cute. Pretty smile, honey eyes, thick curls. A few months ago, he would have been all over that, would have laid it on thick, would have killed to get a number scribbled across his cup. Now it just passes by as a fleeting thought, lightened by amusement and an odd contentment that settled into his chest as he thought of dark navy eyes and shy smiles hidden beneath a heavy dark fringe. When his name is called, he takes his cup with a grateful smile and turns to the store. Right, time for a mullet hunt. His search is somewhat systematic as he strolls along the aisles, keeping an eye out for those telltale moss-green shirts. He doesn't find him in the bargain books, and he's not in the young adult section. He's not in the travel section, nor is he in the non-fiction area. He even peeks into the sectioned off kids section hopefully, but sees no sign of Keith. The image of some kids tugging on his shirt as he's trying to stock is too priceless. Or even better, Keith pointing books out to kids with that soft, easy smile he reserves for when he's being sincere and relaxed. Or Keith reading to them in the little corner with cushions laid out over the floor. Yeah, okay, that does unfair things to his heart. Time to stop thinking about that. He skims past the manga section, peeking into the CD room, but finding no evidence of him. He's about to give up and just text him when he catches sight of a dull green shirt out of the corner of his eye. He freezes, momentum catching with his leg extended before he's backtracking, peeking back around the corner, and yep, that's him. He's in the romance section, carved off books next to him as he stands in front of a shelf. He's got one earbud in, and his head idly bobs to the music, lips relaxed and moving as he mouths the words. His fingers idly push and pull at the spines of books, organizing them and making them all level. He must get to a dramatic point in whatever he's listening to, because he sharply bends his head to the side, pausing his lip movements before he's picking the lyrics back up. It's cute! Far, far too cute! Lance leans against the shelf on the far end of the aisle, one arm crossed lazily over his chest, and the other holding up his drink so he can idly sip at it while he watches Keith. He can't have been standing there for more than 30 seconds before Keith turns to take a step down the aisle and sees him. He jumps and does a double take all at once, stiffening before putting a hand in his chest. Jesus fucking Christ, he hisses. Lance grins around his jaw. Nope, just me. Keith's eyes narrow, lips pursing into a small frown as his shoulders hunch a little. If he looks really hard, he thinks he might be able to see him blush. How long were you standing there? Lance's grin stays fixed firmly in place as he gives a vague shrug. Keith's frown deepens, but in that small way where his bottom lip pushes out just a little, about more than anything, really. He blinks then, straightening a little and glancing around the store. Weren't we going to meet up at the studio? What time is... He starts to reach into his pocket for his phone, confusion clear on his face, but Lance waves him off. No, dude, you still got like an hour on your shift. He shoves his hand into his pocket and walks a few steps closer so they can converse like normal people. Keith glances up at him warily. Is he ever not suspicious? Can't he just be happily surprised for once? Then why are you here? Lance shrugs. I had nothing better to do, so I thought I'd bother you. His lips twitch like he's trying to hide a smile as he deadpans. So, like always. Lance's grin brightens. Like always. He follows Keith around while he finishes stocking, snickering at the startled looks and side eyes they get from teenagers and middle-aged moms attempting to browse through the romance section. Why do all the dudes on these books look the same? Lance says, nodding to the book in Keith's hand. He looks down at it, like he's just now realizing it's there, and takes a moment to stare at the cover. It's vague like the rest of them. Some bare-chested guy with overlays of fire and another of wolf eyes. Finally he shrugs, shoving it onto the shelf. I guess that's what women find attractive. Lance rolls his eyes, glaring at another book cover that looks far too similar to the last one, but by a completely different author. They've got muscles where I'm pretty sure muscles aren't supposed to be. Do you think they're photoshopped? Probably. That's so unrealistic! He shrugs again, standing from his previously crouched position and stretching his arms high above his head. It's supposed to be a fantasy, I guess. What about you? Keith's arms fall back down, hands landing on the cart's push rail. His lips purse into a small frown as one brow arches. What? Lance nods back to the books. Is that what you found attractive? Keith blinks, confusion clearing and turning to surprise before he snorts, a short breathy laugh as he shakes his head. Yeah, no, not my type. What is your type then? Lance prods, a teasing edge to his voice as he waggles his eyebrows. It's casual. It's cool. He's just poking fun at the fact that they're kind of make-out buddies, and it totally doesn't matter if he's actually not Keith's type. No, won't matter at all. His heart is totally not slamming against his ribcage right now. Jesus, is it hot in here? Definitely not, because he's chill. Keith eyes him then, gaze flickering down to where Lance has his straw pulled out of his cup and is licking whipped cream off of it. It freezes, and Keith's eyes flicker back up. His face is relaxed, lip quirked into an amused little smirk as he hums. Wouldn't you like to know? He pushes the cart past him as Lance gracefully tries and fails not to choke. Keith! He says when he can finally breathe. He whips around to see Keith rounding the corner of the aisle. Keith, come back! We were having a conversation! He starts after him but stops mid-step as Keith backs back into view. That infuriatingly small smirk is still in place. I have to clean up in the back before my shift ends. Try not to get into trouble while I'm gone. Then he's out of sight again and Lance is reeling. Try not to get into trouble while I'm gone! He mocks, even though Keith's already gone. I'm not a child, Keith! He swears he hears a faint chuckle and his lips quirk into a small smile despite himself. When Keith finds him again, he's claimed a table for himself at the cafe and is currently crushing his high score in Flappy Bird. He's hunched over the table, arms outstretched and bent over his cup. It's empty now, but he idly chews on the straw out of habit, eyes on his screen. Ready to go?
Keith says, and Lance jumps, letting out a small yelp and totally not fumbling with his phone. The bird hits the ground, and he glares over his shoulder at Keith, a small pat on his lips. Keith eyes his screen, one eyebrow raised.
Seriously?
He shrugs, standing up and shoving his phone back into his pocket. Keith is there wearing a leather jacket over his work polo, with a bag over his shoulder and a helmet under his arm. What? It's a classic! Keith rolls his eyes, but there's a smirk on his lips as he turns away.
Sure.
He walks away without another word, and Lance grabs his bag and slings it over his shoulders before hurrying after him. The wind is picked up outside, ominous and crisp. It hasn't started raining yet, but the thick gray clouds rolling above are threat enough. When they reach Keith's bike, Lance hangs back, taking a moment to simply admire it. Mostly black with cherry red accents. It's a thing of beauty. He's seen Keith on it plenty of times, straddling the leather and metal like he was born to, looking like every bad boy wet dream he's ever had. Rolling up to the dance studio or the park or Pidge's and Hunk's apartment, leaving Lance a little hot under the collar and weak at the knees. He's never experienced such a strange and strong mix of jealousy and desire, but fuck if he didn't feel it every time. And now he's going to get a ride on it with Keith. Oh, sweet Marilyn Monroe, he's going to die. Keith goes straight to his bike, completely oblivious to his internal struggles. He pops the seat and reaches into the compartment. Lance jumps as he turns and tosses a helmet at him, nearly dropping it. Keith just smirks before turning back and tossing his bag inside before closing it up. Lance slips the helmet on and bounds forward, throwing his leg over the bike before Keith can get a chance. He startles for a moment, then just watches, one eyebrow raised. Lance ignores him, soaking up the moment as he wiggles back and forth to get the feel of the bike between his legs, reaches out and grabs the handles. "This is so cool!" he says, a little breathless as he takes it all in. If his mama could see him now, she'd probably kill him. But right now, Lance is living!
You sure you didn't come by early just to get a ride?
Keith asks, and when Lance glances at him, his lips are quirked up into a small amused smile. Lance lets go of the handles and leans back. What? Me? No! But he can't stop the grin from crawling across his face. Maybe. Keith rolls his eyes, but his smirk widens as he lightly shoves at his shoulder. Move over. Lance scoots back as Keith slides on his own helmet before straddling the bike in front of him. It roars to life, vibrating beneath him and suddenly feeling a lot more powerful. He shudders at the sensation, scooting forward until he's pressed up against Keith's back, thighs flush with his and caging him in. He wraps his arms loosely around Keith's waist and wiggles a little in his seat in a show of settling in, enjoying how he can feel Keith juggle. He backs out of the spot and maneuvers toward the exit of the parking lot. He pauses at the stop sign, turning his head and catching Lance's eye through their visors. Hold on tight, I drive fast, he says, voice muffled but loud enough to be heard. Lance scoffs. I am holding on to— Oh my God, Keith! His shout dissolves into laughter as he clutches at Keith's middle, wind whipping at his jacket. He can feel Keith laugh against him. The door is cracked when Keith returns from the bathroom, changed out of his stiff work clothes and into something far more comfortable and fit to dance in. Music is filtering out into the hallway, oddly soft compared to the volume Lance usually listens to his music. Keith doesn't recognize it, but it sounds like a remix. Soft and soothing lyrics, sharp but soft beat that coils in his limbs and urges his body to move. It reminds him of something Pidge would listen to, a shade too chill for what he'd expect from Lance. He reaches up behind him, gathering his hair as best he can and blindly groping along his wrist for his hair tie as he pushes the door open with his hip. He turns as he steps through the doorway, eyes lifting from the floor, and he freezes. Lance is standing across the room, one arm lifted and bent behind his head while his other hand holds it in place. The stretch makes the planes of his back long, lean shape, hinted beneath the fabric of his shirt. Keith's gaze racks down his body, from those long limbs to broad shoulders leading down to slim hips. The hem of his shirt is lifted, exposing his lower back, and Keith's attention zeroes in on the little dimples there. He wants to touch them, run his tongue over the— Lance's hips are doing these little pops to the beat of the music, barely there but controlled and sharp. 2 pops to one side, then the other. It's such a small movement, but his whole body drifts with it, head bobbing and shoulders shifting in the opposite direction from his hips.
Keith's mouth feels dry. When did Lance start affecting him like this? He's seen him dance hundreds of times, and it's never left him weak at the knees, barely able to function, and unable to tear his eyes away. But everything is escalating quickly, rising like a fire, out of control and wild. He's not sure he could stop it, even if he wanted to. And as incredibly sane it is that his body has this physical reaction to Lance, and as terrifying as it is that he feels this out of control, the simple fact remains that it feels good. The stolen moments, fervent touches, hungry kisses, they feel good. He likes it. He likes all of it. And nothing's really changed in their friendship. Nothing's become a problem or an issue, so he really doesn't see any point in stopping it. They're both adults. They can both indulge in the physical aspect of a relationship if it feels good and they both enjoy it, right? No strings attached. Easy. Clean. Strings are messy. Strings get tangled. He's never really had strings, and if that's not what Lance wants, he's not going to push it. He doesn't need strings to enjoy Lance's mouth on his and the touch of those long, slender fingers, the press of that lean torso against his, and the wrap of those long legs around his hips. If he can get all of that, have a taste whenever he craves it, be happy with it, and not have their friendship change, then there's no real point in pushing Lance for more, right? Pushing for more can end up pushing Lance out of his comfort zone, and pushing him out of his comfort zone could end up pushing him away. Pushing him away means no more stolen kisses, no more sly looks and eager tugs into hidden corners, no more hurried and desperate touches. Pushing him away means no more easy friendship, casual touches, lazy smiles, the playful back and forth. Pushing him away means no more partnership, no more of that synergy they'd worked so hard to build up, no more of that trust they'd spent so long creating. Pushing him away is the last thing Keith wants, so he's fine with where they are. Unfortunately, where they are is leaving him hungry for more. It had escalated quickly. Last week, specifically, he had been fine with what they were doing, just making out on occasion. Probably more frequently than they needed to, but that was fine. Making out, sloppy kisses, exploring mouths, wandering hands, nothing more. But that was fine. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't enough. Seeing Lance practicing his choreography, seeing him take it upon himself to actually practice and learn what Keith was trying to teach him, seeing him effortlessly reproduce Keith's style before weaving in his own movements, seeing that scowl of determination followed by the confident grin when he had nailed it. Keith's body knew what he wanted far before his mind had caught up. That had been their most productive practice session to date. He'd walked into the room like he was surprised to find Lance already there, and without letting him know that he had been watching him like a creep. Lance had brightened immediately, eager to show him what he'd done, that he'd learned the dance and connected the dots where Keith had been struggling with transitions. They had practiced over and over again until their rocky synergy was at full swing, bodies and limbs aligning, sending adrenaline and an excited high pulsing through his veins. And then Lance had choreographed the chorus. That was an experience. He didn't plan things out in his head first and go through it slowly like Keith did. He rolled with it at full speed again and again, trying things until something clicked and fit. Keith let him. He'd put up with Keith's way of doing things, so the least Keith could do was try for him. It was a mess. Half the time Lance didn't even remember what he'd done to begin with. His energy was high, excitement making him babble and concentration all over the place. Luckily, Keith has always been a fast learner. He was able to watch Lance's moves and imitate them. Together, they mapped it out. Turns out they really do make a good team. Afterwards, however, without the drive to dance and without the concentration on their routine there to keep him grounded, his mind kept wandering back to Lance, body remembering exactly what it had felt before their practice session, eyes watching Lance as hunger coiled low in his gut. Had they left immediately with Pidge and Hunk as they had planned to, Keith might have been able to fight off the feeling, let it dissipate, and dealt with his newfound need that night on his own. But Pidge and Hunk had asked for an extra 30 minutes to finish up a key part in their routine, and Keith couldn't rein in his impulses. He'd crossed 3 lines that day. He had dragged Lance off to the stairwell where he knew there were no cameras and pushed him against the wall. His lips were on Lance's only a moment later, cutting off his startled yelp. Lance had been stiff, body frozen, and fingers digging into Keith's arms. There had always been an unspoken rule that the studio was a sacred place, a place to dance. Their newfound habits were a distraction, and that wasn't something they needed while preparing for regionals. But when Keith pressed Lance to the wall, it had only taken him approximately 2 seconds before relaxing against him, mouth opening in obvious invitation, eyes falling shut, and softly groaning as his arms wrapped around Keith's shoulders. That had been the first line they crossed, and while Keith had initiated it, they had crossed together. Once that barrier had been torn down, Lance was just as eager as Keith, feeding off his desperation as he gave as good as he got, hands sliding under Keith's shirt and dragging his nails down his back. That was when Keith had crossed the second line, alone this time. They'd always had a silent agreement not to leave marks. Anything that could be seen later as evidence was avoided. That, however, didn't stop Keith from mouthing his way down Lance's neck and sinking his teeth into the meat of his shoulder. He might have stopped there had it not been for the way Lance's body arched in him and thrown back in a gasp as his nails dug in deeper. So we continued, sucking mark after mark into that deliciously dark skin, tasting of salt and smelling of Lance. The third line was crossed accidentally, and it had been entirely Lance's fault. With his head tilted to the side to give Keith room, his hands had slid down Keith's back, fingers digging into his ass and squeezing, pulling their hips flush. It had moved quickly from there, hips grinding, Keith's thighs sliding between Lance's, pushing up into him as they rutted against each other against the wall, sloppy and uncoordinated like a couple of teenagers, but far too gone to care because it felt good. Then Lance had stopped them. It had been abrupt. He had tensed and bit off a low groan before shoving Keith away a moment later. He had stumbled away, surprised and shocked, jarred out of the distant mindset of blurred pleasure that he had been in. It left him reeling, dazed, and confused. He barely managed to catch sight of Lance's panicked expression before he'd shoved past him, practically running into the hallway and leaving Keith alone in the stairwell, heart rate high, lips wet and swollen, and with the worst case of blue balls he'd experienced to date. Lance found him later, leaning up against the wall outside Pigeon Hunk's room, arms crossed over his chest and scowl on his face. It wasn't until Lance sidled up next to him, shoulders hunched, movements hesitant, smiles sheepish, cheeks stained red, that Keith realized what had happened. And after that, well, he couldn't really stay mad when he was too busy experiencing a self-satisfied and smug high. That was a week ago. They hadn't done anything since, and it's not for lack of want. He's caught Lance's eye a couple times, conveyed as best he can with subtle expression and will alone, but they haven't been able to get away. It seems like their friends have just always been there, or they're always busy, or they're in a place where they can't slip away without arousing suspicion. And neither of them have stepped up to cross that fourth line of specifically arranging a time and place to meet up alone, because that would be crossing dangerously into booty call territory, which would squarely put them into full-on friends with benefits territory, and that's a line neither of them has crossed yet, despite how much they've been towing at it. There's movement in the mirror, and Keith's gaze flickers to it in time to lock with Lance's. He grins, warm and welcoming and at ease, and Keith has to look away. Heart in his throat, mouth dry, he shifts back into motion, feeling an awkward stiffness in his limbs as he lets his hands drop, ponytail forgotten, and shuffles further into the room. He tosses his bag aside, sliding it across the room until it hits the mirror with perhaps a little too much force. "Jeez, lighten up, dude! It's a dance lesson, not a funeral!" Lance says, all good-natured amusement, as his arms drop to cross over his chest. Right, dance lesson, that's why he's here. Great. Just great. Why did he agree to this again? Keith meets his eyes again, giving him a flat look as he deadpans.
Paige texted me and said they're going to pull up to the video feed for this and save it to laugh at me later.
Lance blinks, smile falling, as he turns to glance up at the camera sitting innocently in the corner of the ceiling. When he looks back to Keith, there's a small smirk curling at the edges of his lips. "Then let's give them a show, shall we?" He whips around suddenly, pointing to the camera as his knees bend, rotating his hips in a way that's far too exaggerated to be anything close to sexy, and far more into the realm of ridiculous. He puts his hands behind his head, grinding his hips before turning around and putting his hand on his knees, popping his ass. He hops back in short jumps, ass towards the camera. The whole time, he holds a ridiculous duck face and smoldering eyes that are far too comical. Keith crosses one arm over his chest, covering his mouth with his free hand to hide his smirk. He can't, however, completely choke back the laughter that bubbles up his throat. It comes out in a loud chuckle slipping through his fingers. "You're terrible," he says, but there's nothing but amused fondness in his voice. Lance straightens, shenanigans abandoned, as he grins. He takes a few steps towards him, arms held out. "Now that you don't look like you're about to murder someone, ready to get started?" He feels his smile immediately drop, hand falling to cross over his chest. He sighs, brows pinching. "I guess." Lance's grin falls into something smaller, voice softer. "Come on, it's easy." "Yeah, for you." "For you too. You just gotta loosen up. I know that stick has made its home in your butt, but it's time to pull it out." Keith isn't convinced, and he must not look at either, because Lance is then rolling his eyes before stepping forward, shooing Keith away from the middle of the room. "Just stand over there. I'll show you how it's done." Keith does as he's told, leaning back against the mirror with his arms crossed over his chest. Lance has the small Bluetooth remote in his hand, and he points it at where his phone is waiting on the table. The song shifts, Shape of You starts playing, and Lance is moving. His body pops with the beat, little movements in his hips, shoulders, and limbs. He moves into the center of the room with slow paces. The beat doesn't really pick up, but Lance's moves get a little more complicated, a little more involved. Keith can barely see a pattern to them, but they fit together seamlessly, fitting the vibe of the song perfectly. "It's all about trusting your body to do what it needs to do," Lance is saying. "You know how to dance. I know you do. You know all sorts of dance styles. You just gotta feel the music and just kind of let your body fit everything together. Go with the flow, you know?" He knows theoretically, but putting it to practice has always been a hassle. Made him uncomfortable, to the point where he just avoided it altogether. "What if I don't know the song?" he asks. Lance is doing little shoulder movements as he shimmies in a circle, but he still manages to shrug. "Doesn't matter." Keith's frown deepens. "How could it not matter?" Lance sends him a small amused smile over his shoulder. "You've listened to plenty of music, Keith. All music follows the same patterns. You can pretty much always count on it having the same beat. Doesn't matter if you know all the lyrics or not. You can still move to it." He holds out the remote, and the song abruptly changes. Keith recognizes the beginning notes. They're pretty distinguishable. "Toxic" is pretty different from "Shape of You," but Lance moves effortlessly into a new dance. The foundations are the same, but there's a different edge, more body rolls, a different beat, a different vibe that fits this song better. "How do you do that?" he asks, more to himself than anything, but that doesn't stop Lance from flashing a grin. "It's easy once you get into it." "Somehow I doubt that," he mutters, scowling as Lance changes the song mid-hip roll. Keith watches for a few more songs. Lance doesn't spend more than maybe 20 seconds on each of them, showing off how quickly he slips from one song to the next with barely a break in his movements, how easy it looks to just switch up styles and adjust to new beats. It's such a strange mix of music, jumping around from pop to hip-hop to rap to rock, spanning across several decades of popular music. He changes the song and holds out a hand to Keith. "Your turn," he says, an easy smile on his face as a trumpet plays a few notes. Keith just stares at his hand, lips pursed into a small frown. He can't quite get his body to move. It can't be that bad, right? He can do this. It's just dancing. Just mindless dancing. He can do that. Just reach out and take his hand. Just do it. He can... "When I need motivation." Keith's eyes snap up to Lance's, which are half lidded and sparkling with his smile as he sings, body doing these little pop steps as he moves toward Keith. "My one solution is my queen, 'cause she stays strong, yeah, yeah." He takes Keith by the wrist, and Keith's arms unfold, feet moving of their own accord as Lance pulls him out into the room. She is always in my corner right there when I want her. He never stops moving, hips and shoulders tilting back and forth with each step, feet never staying still, even when they stop in the center of the room. All these other girls are tempting, but I'm empty when you're gone. He takes Keith's other wrist, holding them up between them and sliding his grip until they're holding hands, weaving their fingers together. Keith just stares, eyes fixed on that easygoing smile, those stupid smoldering eyes. He feels heat crawling up the back of his neck, willing it to stay away from his face. Thank God for his gloves, because he can feel his palms sweating. How does Lance do this to him? And they say, do you need me? Do you think I'm pretty? As the chorus picks up, Lance dances simply, just a few steps to the beat, a couple forward and a couple back, effectively just dancing in place, but always moving. His shoulders are into it, hands moving and dragging Keith's along with it, effectively forcing Keith's torso to move along with his arms. And just like that, a switch is flipped. Instincts take over. Years of dancing showing themselves as his body starts to move of its own accord. He's stiff and awkward and he knows it, but he's moving, mirroring Lance's steps, moving his arms with Lance's, getting his body more into the beat. Do I make you feel like cheating? I'm like, no, not really. He stares at their feet for a moment, and once he feels like he's got the movement down, he glances up at Lance for some kind of confirmation. His face is bright and considerably blinding and radiating and... it's too much. Luckily, he saved the embarrassment of gaping at his stupid happy smile as Lance suddenly lets go of one of his hands and uses the other to force him into a spin. Oh, I think that I found myself a cheerleader. She is always right there when I need her. He pulls Keith in close and he finds himself pressed right up against him, bodies flush as their feet automatically go back to the previous pattern, only this time he has Lance's arm around his lower back while the other still holds his hand. Keith's own hands awkwardly rest on his shoulders as Lance continues to sing. Oh, I think that I found myself a cheerleader. She is always right there when I need her. Even when his mind is reeling, his body automatically relaxes against Lance's. It's surreal and strange, but between Shiro and Alora's lessons and their frequent makeout sessions, he finds himself actually kind of comfortable being this close to Lance. It's such an odd contrast to just a couple months ago that he's still trying to comprehend it when Lance suddenly spins him away again. This time he lets go, leaving Keith standing on his own as he changes the song. Panic starts to well up inside him, squeezing his chest as he's not sure what to do. But Lance is smiling, and at least he recognizes immortals. Lance is already moving, dancing close and around him without actually touching. He's giving Keith space to do his own thing, but without Lance's guiding hand, Keith is left uncertain and grasping at straws. He tries. He really does. But he feels like everything he's ever known about dancing flies out the window. His movements feel jerky and stiff, like he can't quite catch up to the beat. Everything feels disjointed, like he can't connect movements. Meanwhile, Lance is just moving around him with all the ease in the world. He frowns, heat rising to his face. He can do this. He knows he can, but it's not working. And the more he messes up, the more frustrated he feels, the tighter the grip on his chest. It doesn't help that he can feel Lance watching him. Lance, who's so good at this! He wills himself to relax, but he just can't! This isn't working. He snaps, stopping abruptly and crossing his arms over his chest, shoulders hunching. He glares at his feet. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see that Lance has stopped. He regards him silently for a moment, and Keith has to bite his cheek to keep from fidgeting. All right, no problem. I have an idea, Lance says, and it's still calm and casual and not at all frustrated like Keith was expecting. He blinks, looking up and watching as Keith walks over to crouch by his bag, digging around in it. He stands then, spinning around and holding out a strip of cloth. Ta-da! What are you... He stops as Lance puts the cloth to his eyes and starts to tie it behind his head. His eyebrows shoot upward, lips pursing in a confused frown. What are you doing? When it's tied in place, he bends down to grab the remote before making his way back to where Keith's standing, stopping several steps away. His smile is small, genuine, and a little sheepish. I had a feeling this might happen, so I came prepared. He gestures to the blindfold. This way I can still dance with you, but I can't see you, so you have no reason to be embarrassed. Keith's lips part, forming a small circle in his surprise because, oh, that's actually really thoughtful. Lance holds out his hand, though it's a little off center, and he's facing more over Keith's shoulder than actually at him. His smile never falters, small and confident and encouraging and trusting, wrapped up into this pretty little package that has Keith weak at the knees. Ready to try again? Keith is hesitant as he reaches out to take Lance's hand, and the uncertainty bleeds into his voice. I guess. Lance's smile softens. Just try to relax, okay? It's just me, and I can't see you anyway. Keith takes a deep breath through his nose, and when he lets it out, he feels the ghost of a smile taking hold. Okay. He takes Lance's hand, and the long fingers curl around his own. His head cocks to the side, smirk in place. By the way, I'm counting on you not to let me run into any walls. Don't make me regret this, go-getting. Keith bites back a laugh. No promises. It takes several more songs before Keith actually starts to feel himself relax. He stays stiff for the most part, dancing in the vaguest sense imaginable as he eyes Lance cautiously. But it really does seem like he can't see. He can't see, and he doesn't care whatever Keith is doing. He just does his own thing, dancing on his own and occasionally skipping through the songs, which Keith has noticed isn't as frequently as when he dances on his own, giving Keith plenty of time to adjust to a song before switching it up. Once he's certain that Lance really can't see him, he lets himself experiment a little. He mimics some of Lance's movements, getting a feel for them before putting his own spin on it. When he choreographs, he can stop and rewind, go again when he messes up. Here he has to keep rolling with it. Now that he's paying attention, he can see the moments that Lance messes up, skips a beat or loses his balance, a transition gone wrong, but he always recovers so seamlessly that Keith blinks and is gone, making him question the fact that he faltered at all. It's impressive, really. Lance also has an incredible spatial awareness. Despite being unable to see, and despite constantly moving and turning, he never wanders away from the center of the room, circling it and owning it without ever wandering away, no matter which direction he turned. You gotta relax, Keith, Lance sings roughly 4 songs in. Keith scowls. I am relaxed. You're not, he teases, stepping behind him and playfully spotting for his hair. He misses and hits his shoulder, but the sentiment is there. How would you even know? I can hear it in how you're moving, he says matter-of-factly. You sound hesitant still. Chill, dude. It's just you and me. I am relaxed, he repeats, sounding more uncertain. He is relaxed, for the most part. He just doesn't know how to move his body. He's questioning everything. Even if it feels like he's doing well, who's to say he does just look like an idiot? Okay, let me rephrase, Lance says, moonwalking in front of him and stopping, striking a disco pose. Get out of your head! Keith blinks, brows pinching. What? Lance smiles, sliding forward and reaching until his hand hits Keith's chest. They move up as he steps close, putting his hands on Keith's neck and leaning forward until their foreheads touch. Keith's breath hitches, and he really hopes Lance can't hear it. Get out of your head, he repeats, voice soft. Keith can feel his breath against his lips. Stop thinking so much. Just have fun. We're just 2 friends being idiots and having fun. Stop thinking about what it looks like or what you're doing and just dance. He pulls away, then sliding backwards with a smirk on his lips that looks far more infuriating when Keith knows he can't even see him. Unless you don't think you can. It's a playful challenge. Keith knows it is. He knows he's being baited, and he takes it anyway. We'll see about that, he says, confidence that he definitely doesn't feel clicking into place in the face of Lance's challenge. Prove it then, hotshot! Get out of your head. Stop thinking. Patience yields focus. It's surprisingly easy to slip into the right mindset after that. He just kind of, let's go, kicks that tight ball of nerves to the curb, just releases it, lets himself really relax, closes his own eyes and focuses on the songs as they play, lets himself feel it, lets the beat move him. Turns out, Lance is right. All music is the same at its heart. It's all patterns, all rhythms that he's heard thousands of times before. Even when he doesn't know the song, it doesn't matter. He falters a little more than he'd like, but he just lets it roll away, moves into the next bit. His body is a lot more attuned to the moves he's practiced than he realizes. He finds himself doing fragments of practiced choreography, slotting them together with other bits as the music hits just right. It's natural and fluid, feels it in his muscle memory and in the way his body reacts. It's freeing. He feels light, at ease, and it's good. He feels good. When he bumps into Lance, jarring them both and nearly knocking them both to the floor, a laugh bubbles out of him before he can stop it. He turns, eyes open, and finds Lance looking at him, blindfold already cast aside. His hair is a mess, and his eyes are bright with laughter, grin wide, and splitting his cheeks.
When'd you take that off?
He's not mad, just curious. He thought he would be mad, but he's not. And he's still moving, body unwilling to stop now that he's started. Lance shrugs, grin, turning mysterious. A couple songs ago, you were so into it you didn't even notice. Didn't want to throw you out of your groove, though. You're doing great, he says, grabbing Keith's hand and spinning him around before releasing him. Both of them are laughing as the song switches. Lance's musical taste is all over the place, but Keith finds that he doesn't really mind. Now that their eyes are open, they start to play off each other. Lance tries to copy his movements, which makes him try to set up more complicated sequences. They trade off doing ridiculous moves before pointing to the other. When the song switches to something slow, they do dramatic interpretations of Shiro and Honora, sniggering the entire time. When the song switches to what? Keith tries to wrestle the remote out of Lance's hands, but he's long and lanky and slippery like a snake. He sings loudly, bumping his hips and ass against Keith to stop his efforts, and Keith can only get the remote from him when he resorts to tickling. When he changes the song, it goes to the Spice Girls, and honestly, he's not too surprised. He gets to cherish the look of complete and utter shock on Lance's face as he rattles off the lyrics to Wannabe, complete with body rolls and hip pops. Keith can't remember the last time he had so much fun. He's not sure how much time passes before they stop, and he's lost track of the songs that have gone by, but his body aches pleasantly and his breath is labored. His clothes stick to him as he makes his way over to his stuff and picks out his water bottle, chugging nearly half of it before gasping for air. When he glances over at Lance, he's in a similar shape, hair sticking up at odd angles from running his hands through it, but still managing to look good. More than good, really. Keith's eyes follow a bead of sweat that drips down his neck, focusing in on how his Adam's apple bobs while he drinks. So, Lance says, and Keith's eyes snap back up to his. He raises an eyebrow in silent question. Lance puts a hand on his hip, gesturing with his bottle. You feeling better about all of this? Keith shrugs, capping his water bottle and tossing it aside.
I guess.
He frowns, brows pinching.
But I don't... Hunk mentioned a dance-off, right? Dancing here with you is one thing, but I don't know if I can in front of a crowd.
He doesn't even realize his hands are clenched into fists until Lance sets his bottle aside, sliding up next to him, putting one hand on his arm and the other wrapping around his back to rest on his hip. Hey, it's fun, okay? I promise. We play in teams, and it's not like you'll be dancing the whole time. We take turns, and you'll only be dancing for maybe 20 seconds max before you pass it off to someone else. Barely enough time to mess up. Keith looks up, making eye contact with Lance in the mirror. It gives him a flat look. Gee, thanks. Lance chuckles, moving to stand more behind him, wrapping his arms casually around Keith's waist and leaning down a fraction to rest his chin on his shoulder. When did they get to the point where they could just be this close and it's not the least bit awkward? When did the nearness become more comfortable than it was awkward? Really though, you're a natural. You're just overthinking it. I guarantee you're a better dancer than most of the people there. Keith watches as his lips quirk into a small smile. Was that a compliment? Lance snorts, rolling his eyes as he straightens. What? No! You must have mullet in your ears, he says, but he's smiling. His hands unwrap themselves, but they don't leave him, and he doesn't step back. Instead, his hands slide over Keith's waist to rest at his hips, a warm and firm weight that has goosebumps rising on his arms. In the mirror, Keith watches as he leans forward again until their faces are side by side and he can feel his breath on his ear. "You're still a little stiff here, though," he says, voice dropping soft and low, fingers squeezing his hips lightly, eyes half-lidded as they hold Keith's in the mirror. And just like that, the atmosphere shifts. It's so subtle, but so powerful. Movements suddenly slow and purposeful, heat slipping into the air, energy humming between them, static where they touched. It goes right to Keith's gut, coiling low and spreading heat between his legs even as his heart hammers in his throat. Everything is instantly more sensitive. He can feel his clothes where they rub at his skin, the warm, firm weight of Lance's chest as he presses against Keith's back. He knows exactly where this is going. "I can move my hips just fine," he says, voice matching Lance's, low and coy, lofty and playful. Lance hums, and without looking away from Keith's gaze in the mirror, he dips his head and presses a chaste, lingering kiss to the exposed curve of his neck. "Prove it!" He purrs in that way that never fails to make shivers run down Keith's spine. He doesn't recognize the song playing. He barely registers it's there at all. Something hip-hop with a lot of bass and a heavy beat. Lance's hips start moving first, pressing up against him from behind, a slow grind that has Keith immediately following. He sways his hips under the guidance of Lance's hands, encouraged by the press of his hips. Lance's fingers slip beneath the hem of his shirt, sliding along the skin above his waistband, back and forth, fleeting light touches that are both too much and not enough. A tease and a promise. His breath hitches and his back arches, automatically pressing his ass back into Lance's hips. Lance hums low and deep, bending his head again to lick up Keith's neck before pressing a kiss behind his ear. His head tilts to the side, eyes closing and breath becoming heavier. Lance drags his teeth down his neck before biting into the juncture of his shoulder. Keith gasps, hands going to rest on Lance's forearms, not to stop him and not necessarily to encourage him, simply as an anchor as he finds himself quickly spiraling, losing himself to the moment. Lance's finger dipped below his waistband, sliding across his stomach and feeling the curve of his hip bones, and Keith is gone. He no longer needs Lance's encouragement to move his hips. He grinds back against him, pulling his stomach in to create just the barest of gaps between his waistband and skin, giving Lance more room, encouraging as best he can, willing silently for him to keep going. "Don't stop, just a little more."